What is your measure of success? And it cannot be external, it cannot be other people. He said keep showing up until they acknowledge this, and I'm like, no, keep showing up, period. It's that moment of potential change and transition that is best to really sit down and be honest about what this country needs. We're really leaning quite American these days in terms of that low down, dirty, mudslinging politics, that real personality driven politics. Episode 9 already. We're already on episode 9. Welcome, guys. Welcome back to It's That Deep, the podcast. This is a podcast where everything literally is that deep, as per the name. We pick apart stories, we pick about all of the happenings that are happening in the world, and we go a bit deeper and we try to not only make sense of them but explore what they tell us about who we are as a society and as a people. So welcome if it's your first time listening. If it's not, welcome back. Thank you for rocking with me, and I hope you've had a good week. I really do. The first full week of February, the year is already like it's moving, it's going. What did I get up to this week? Oh, I watched The Iron Claw with my sisters. It's a really good film. Just come out with Zac Efron and Carmi from The Bear. Really good film. I would say apply discretion with who you watch it with. Ultimately, spoiler alert, it's about siblings who die. It's more than that, but the premise is like most of them die, and I went to watch it with my sisters, so not the most comfortable watch, but yeah, that was a good way to start the week, I guess. And yeah, I've just been raring to go, seeing what's going on in the news. I've been also reading some of the commentary on like my YouTube shorts. People are calling me woke, people are disagreeing with me, which is fine. I welcome absolutely all of it. So as always, I want to hear what you guys are thinking about what I'm saying and where you stand on some of these news stories, where you stand on some of these issues. And I think this week we've got some interesting issues that you might have a stance on. We'll see, but shall we get into it? Okay, so honorable pick number 1. If you're on YouTube, you'll see I did a little something different. I switched up a little bit. I also added something to the set, aka my living room. So, with levels don't change small, but my first pick for this week. So we had the Grammys on Sunday night, I want to say. Like I said, I feel like the last few episodes have kind of referenced award season. We're moving into the music part of it now, but we had the Grammys on Sunday. Another thought I just had, we also had the Mobos this week. I would talk about it, but I honestly don't think it's worth my time. Like, the Mobos have fallen off in a way that needs to be studied, because there was not a peep, not a whistle about the Mobos. But anyway, so Grammys happen as the Grammys happen, and there was a really, I'm going to call it awkward just because that's the word I would use to describe it. There's a really awkward moment where Jay-Z came and collected his award. So he was the second ever recipient of the Dr. Dre Global Impact Award, which was a new award that they started last year, and Dr. Dre was the recipient for that, and second time round Jay-Z was, and he got up there with his daughter Blue Ivy, who is she's gorgeous. Like, she's such a beautiful 12-year-old, and she's really tall as well. But yeah, he got up there and accepted his award. It looked different because it was a different style of award, and he actually made a nice speech, and then it started to get awkward about like 3/4 of the way through, because he started to speak about Beyonce, his wife. If you didn't know, I feel like everybody should know that, but he started to speak about Beyonce and how she is the most like Grammy award winning person. That English didn't add up, but she's won the most Grammy awards ever in the history of ever, but she's never won album of the year. Taylor Swift won album of the year this year, and that's a fourth time winning album of the year. So he basically just made a point about like, it doesn't make sense that Beyonce would win all the like most of the awards that anybody has ever won, but she hasn't won album of the year, which is obviously, I guess, quite prestigious in that industry. And that aside, that was, I think, quite awkward. I also think, just my personal opinion, a bit redundant to go to the Grammys, accept the Grammy, and whilst you're accepting the Grammys, scold the Grammys. Like, I just think it's a bit redundant in terms of like the point you're trying to make. But that aside, and actually where I want to focus for this honorable pick is something he said at the end of his speech post Beyonce gate. I'm just going to read it because I just thought, this is really, really interesting. So he said, we got to keep showing up. And you know what? Forget the Grammys for a second. Just in life, you got to keep showing up until they give you all those accolades you feel you deserve, until they call you chairman, until they call you a genius, until they call you the GOAT, the greatest of all time. And I was watching that speech on Monday morning. As soon as I heard that bit, it got me thinking about how we as humans measure success and how so much of our definition of success is contingent on what X says about you, or what Y says about you, or what Z says about you. Because he's accepting this award, and he finishes this award by saying, show up until they call you this, until they acknowledge that you're this, until they say this about you. And I just thought to myself, have we gotten to the point as humans that our measure of success is entirely external and not internal? And I get it's award season. Like, award season is literally designed for peers to acknowledge peers and to call peers great and to say, hey, I love your work. But I think for me that statement, and the fact that he closed his speech with that statement, is so indicative of the fact that we're in this social media age where, you know, there's this phenomenon of like, if you didn't record something, it didn't happen. Similarly, in this regard, like, if somebody didn't applaud you for something, it wasn't worth being applauded for. If someone didn't acknowledge your work on this, then your work wasn't good enough. Like, it's a really techie ground to be in, and something that I've been noticing in myself, and probably you guys in yourselves as well. Like, we don't realize how much we've slipped into living for the validation of other people. And I just, you know, this is Jay-Z. Like, this is for many the GOAT. Rock Nation, do you know what I mean? He's one of the ones who quote unquote made it. And the fact that even he, at his age, I'm sure he's probably pushing 50, maybe 55. At his age, he still subconsciously lets out this fact that his measure of success is dependent on what other people say about him. Like, that to me is so interesting, and it caused me to assess myself for a minute and be like, yo, hold up. Is it when somebody likes a story on Instagram or pops up and with the clapping emoji or says, oh my God, your podcast was brilliant, I listened to it, it was great. Is that when I've defined what success is? Or is it like, even today, I did not want to get up and film this podcast. I'm not interested. I'm tired. Do you know what I mean? But the fact that I got up, I procrastinated, but I did get up and I am currently filming it. That's a decision I made internally, and that's a barrier I pushed past internally, and that should make me proud. If one of you lot pops up to me and says, yo, I really enjoyed the podcast, that's great, that's a bonus. But actually, my measure of success came from the fact that there was a personal thing that I overcame, if that makes any sort of sense. So I just found that really interesting. And I think with award season and with the culture online of social media, where we celebrate people, but also there's so much talk about not celebrating people and evil eye, and this person is just watching for your downfall and all this kind of stupid talk. It just made me assess, Feyisara, like, what is your measure of success? And it cannot be external, it cannot be other people. He said, wait until, you know, keep showing up until they call you this, keep showing up until they acknowledge this. And I'm like, no, keep showing up, period. Keep showing up, because actually we're getting deep, but it's actually you honoring a commitment to yourself and you honoring yourself. And so I know it's just I don't even think he knows, like a little passing statement that he said in his speech, but actually got my mind moving and thinking about how much the measure of success changes when we place it in other people, because people change. But actually, when the measure of success is internal, and I'm sure the most successful people in this world have a measure of success that comes from inside them, and that's why they're steadfast and they're immovable and all those beautiful words. So yeah, I feel like this was a perfect example of what this podcast is supposed to be. Jay-Z just made a speech. I don't think he even remembers what he said on Sunday evening, but that stuck with me. And so now I'm going to use it to pick apart where we are as a society, and even personally for myself. So thank you, Jay-Z, for giving me that, giving me my first honorable pick. But yeah, a lot of internal assessment because of that has been happening this week. Yeah, a lot. Okay, so honorable pick numero dos, number 2. I feel like as a British person, it's only right and the honorable thing is for me to talk about my dear monarch, King Charles III, my sovereign. Side note, only Jesus is sovereign. Hello, somebody. But this week, King Charles, well, I guess the palace, revealed that King Charles III, Charlie, as we call him in some African communities, has been diagnosed with cancer. And I don't really want to say that the world erupted, but I'm not going to lie, it was given like those early hours on, I don't know why I remember the date, I really don't. But it's given those early hours on September the 8th, 2020, was it 2022, when our beloved Lizzie went to be with the Lord. Like, it was given that eerie, that type of feel, like people were parked outside Buckingham Palace. The presenters, I think some of them were wearing black. Like, it was giving death. I think I should just say that. So the palace has shared that he's been diagnosed with cancer. They specified not prostate cancer, despite the fact that he went in a few weeks ago for a prostate checkup. I just thought that was weird. You could have just left it at no cancer, but anyway. And then this is also amongst all of the news of Kate Middleton, who has had abdominal surgery but is like out of work, quote unquote work, because I don't know what work they do. So she's out of work until the end of Easter. Like, there's just a lot going on at the moment with the health of the royals, and everyone's just a bit tight-lipped, and nobody's really saying anything. So like, nobody's saying anything really. It's really being left to the imagination of the British people and the world and the British press, which is incredibly dangerous because we know how irresponsible they can be. But I feel like if there's ever a time to open up that conversation again about do we need a monarchy, it's now. It's now. Do you know what I mean? I want to say people wanted to open up that conversation once Lizzie went to be with the father, but out of respect, like, she was the longest reigning monarch this country has seen. She'd seen tens of prime ministers and tens of, US presidents. She had a real regalia about her, and she had a real legacy about her. So people, out of respect, were not opening up that conversation. But there are certain moments in history that I feel people need to put the stake in the ground and really assess what any given society needs, heavy on needs. And I think the revealing of Charles's diagnosis is the perfect time to do this, because a lot of the newspapers, a lot of people, a lot of online commentary shifted their eyes towards Will. And okay, just the potential, or the, what's the word? Yeah, let me just say potential. Just the potential idea that we could, in a matter of months, have a new sovereign. And when people's minds start moving like that, then we go to, coronation. Okay, more money being spent. Then we go to, more money having to be distributed because it needs the correct face on it. Then we go to current affairs, what happens on the global stage with how the UK interacts with XYZ country. And so when something is so up in the air and there's so many alternatives, well, not so many, but there's an alternative coming up behind it, I think it's the best time to discuss whether or not certain things need to be present, and that certain thing in this case is the monarchy. I think it's obvious where I stand on the issue of the monarchy. I don't see the need for one, and the reason I keep saying need, because at the stage that we're at as a country, we really need to think about necessities and what is important and what is disposable. And in my mind, a monarchy who really don't contribute much is disposable. It's discardable. Is that a word? It's discardable. And I know like people bring arguments in favor of the monarchy, they bring in tourism, but I just feel like that's just a weak argument, because the stats, they're there, but they don't add up in that way. And I think this is one of those cases where people hold on to sentiment more than they do actual fact. And it's the sentiment of having a monarchy, which other, first world countries do not have. The US does not have. Many other, many Commonwealth countries do not have a monarchy. There's that like personal sentiment, and they've just always been there, they're part of the furniture. But I find it interesting that as a British people, we can ask for modernity and modernization in so many areas. We ask of it of our MPs, and we ask of it of our prime minister. We ask our schools to keep up with the times and change the curriculum to accommodate new principles and new things happening in the world. But we can't ask that of one of the institutions that has not only been here forever, but is also, the way I see it, a massive burden on society. I think this is where sometimes we get into like sticky water, because people just pick and choose where they want modernity and where they want, and where they stand. Like they change the goalposts, and it just doesn't work for me. So I think this is the time to ask the question, do we need the monarchy? If, God forbid, I'm going to say God forbid, Charles does die, then we have William, who, given this like demographic makeup of the country, is younger than probably more than half of the country. Do we really want him leading this great nation? It's just so many questions, so many things to think about, and so many things we need to be honest about as a nation. It's not necessary. He's not, man. I don't know. I feel like they're a source of more contention than they are good in this country. There's people, I say it all the time, there's people sleeping rough, bro. Homeless people on the streets. We walk past them. We don't give them any sort of acknowledgement or recognition of humanity. But the minute something happens in the palace, I ain't doing that. But people stand up. When Diana died, although Diana, that's my girl, that's my sis. But when Diana died, people left their homes and stood out in the rain and stood out in the sun for hours on end. Do you know what I mean? And I just think, let's get real, guys. Do you know what I mean? Let's get real. Let's get honest about it. I think it's worth really considering what the UK could look like without a monarchy. And although I say that, and I said this, did I say this in my 2023 wrap? I said the media, the press, the government, and the British monarchy are very, what's the word? Intertwined. They're very entangled. They're in an entanglement, situationship, whatever you want to call it. And so I say we need to consider a UK that has no monarchy, but actually there's also the truth of the matter that every prime minister has to go and get royal assent for every single law, every single bill that needs to be passed in the Houses of Parliament. And so I don't imagine Rishi Sunak or Keir Starmer or whoever it will be, we're going to discuss that in a few minutes, I don't imagine them going to Charles or to Will to say, hey, sign off on this law that abolishes monarchy, abolishes you and your family. Like, I just don't see that happening. So that's what I mean when I say there's such this weird, English. There's such a weird entanglement and muddying of this whole entire thing. So my stance on this is clear. I don't know that we need a monarchy. You guys that listen to me, I'm going to assume you don't really think we need a monarchy like that. I just don't see the point. It's not even, I don't even have no deep analysis. I don't see the point. What's the point? What are they doing? Gone, what? There's no point. There's no relevance to them in 2024. And so I'm sorry about Charles. Prayers are actually going up, because obviously cancer is horrible. But I think it's at these moments that it's best it's that moment of potential change and transition that it's best to really sit down and be honest about what this country needs. Okay, so our main story for this week. Now, I shared with you guys last week this internal dilemma that I'm having, which is that I don't know, A, if I'm going to vote, and B, if I do vote, who I give my vote to. And I know oh, influencer. I'm not, please don't call me an influencer. But, I have a platform and I should be using it, to encourage people to do good. But actually, it's a very real dilemma that I'm facing as somebody who believes in the power of politics. That dilemma of like, I don't know what I'm going to do come end of 2024, whenever he schedules the thing for. But I watched what happened this week in Parliament and I said, yeah, I'm not crazy for having this dilemma because it's an absolute madness in that place. And not only that, this week in particular has been a horror for Rishi Sunak. And that's what our main story is going to be, because as much as there's been, I mean, this is one of those weeks he's going to look back on and be like, yeah, headache. You have those weeks and it's like, what? I don't even know how I got through it. I think this is going to be one of his weeks. But even amongst all of that, there's a trend that I'm seeing, which is the Americanization of British politics. And it's a trend where more and more we're seeing that personality is just as important as politics. And I don't even know that I'm mad at it, because I want to know that you're not a psycho before we elect you into office. I do want to know that you're a normal person, but it happens all the time in the US, and I feel like we're seeing it happen here, where politicians are becoming celebrities, and actually whether we like them or not is a major factor in how we vote, as opposed to just their manifesto and their policies. So this horror week for Rishi Sunak started with a one-to-one interview with Piers Morgan. Even as I say that, like, one-to-ones are very much not a British thing. They're very American in style. Like, we don't sit down and interview politicians the way they do musicians. Like, that's just not a thing. But anyway, he sat down with Piers Morgan, which in and of itself is interesting because Piers Morgan went to the US for some time and had a talk show for some time, and I believe he's brought a lot of that American style of journalism over here. So he sat down with Piers Morgan and they were talking about the 5-point plan, which I spoke a little bit about in 2023 Unwrapped, the first part in the January portion, and basically the update on that and if he'd actually achieved anything. And I mean, guess even before that point, like, it was again very celebrity like. They were talking about cricket, they were talking about, I think alcohol. It was just like, this is not giving serious journalism, this is not giving sit down interview with the Prime Minister of this country. But they got to the 5-point plan and then they got into Rwanda, which is one of the points, probably the most contentious at this point. And they thought, it would be well received for them to place a wager on whether or not the flights to Rwanda leave by the general election. So Piers Morgan doesn't believe it will happen. Rishi Sunak does. And Piers Morgan goes, well, let's bet £1,000. Let's bet £1,000 on that, shake my hand. We'll bet £1,000 and we'll see who wins this wager. And okay, fair enough. The wager is going to a refugee charity. But I just thought this is really giving an old boys club in like Soho, London, and it's very, very, very insensitive, like, to reduce the plight of refugees, whether they're good or bad, because that's also been a topic of conversation with the guy who did what he did in Clapham. Like, whether they're good or bad, they are people escaping their homes for various reasons. To reduce their desperation and their plight to a cheeky little £1,000 wager just feels very off, and it feels very insensitive, and it feels very out of touch. That's number one. Number two, we're in a cost of living crisis, and so Rishi Sunak is a millionaire. Piers Morgan, I'm sure, is very, very well off. I don't know that he's a millionaire, but for two rich men to sort of just bandy around £1,000, like, it's not, because it is nothing to them, but for a lot of their people, Talk TV viewers included, in the cost of living crisis, £1,000 is a lot. £1,000 really, really is a lot, and it has even lost its value. So for them to bandy it around in that manner, very carelessly, just felt very nasty, and it felt very, like, again, it's American. It's very gimmicky and very. It's not on the ground. It's not in touch with the British people. And I just thought, that is how you're going to start the week? It's only going to get worse. And it absolutely did. Then later during the week, they, as they always do, have Prime Minister's Questions on a Wednesday. And I mean, Prime Minister's Questions, if you ever watched it, is very childish. I don't even know if I would call it American, because the House of Reps and the Senate is even a bit more composed in the US. But PMQs is very, very childish, very silly. It's essentially just a screaming match. It's debate mate. Did you guys do debate mate in school? It's debate mates with people in suits. I don't even know why we do it. Again, it's probably one of those things of sentiment, like it's part of the furniture that Brits have done for ages. It adds nothing, I'm going to be honest. But anyway, we had PMQs, and actually earlier in the week, the murderers of Brianna Ghey, who was a transgender teen who was murdered, her two killers were convicted earlier in the week, and her mother was in the gallery in the House of Commons. And the Prime Minister stood up to the box and made a really like offhanded joke about the definition of a woman, pointing out the fact that Keir Starmer has U-turned on it and he basically hasn't settled on the definition of a woman. Obviously, quite insensitive, felt incredibly more than it would be on a normal day, because Brianna Ghey's mum was sat in the gallery and she had to watch the Prime Minister perform, and I say perform because that's what they do, perform that joke, and then all his Conservative MPs cackle. So, and then Keir Starmer, rebuttals as they do in debate mate, and he says, disgusted and terrible, how could you say that, insensitive, all of that stuff. And then, there's a lot of uproar on social media about it, and rightfully so. It's an insensitive joke to make, especially to do in front of somebody whose child has just been murdered over the issue of transgenderism. It just gets worse because he then doubles down throughout the course of the week. Brianna Ghey's father says, we need an apology. Give us an apology. And he says, well, no. Basically, the long and short of it, he can use all the words that he wants to use. He said no. So again, we started the week being incredibly out of touch with working class people, wagering on the lives of refugees. Then he gets to Wednesday, and, whether it's a slip of the tongue or whatever, I don't think it is, because they really plan out their scripts for PMQs. Slip of the tongue, whatever you want to call it, insulting not only to Brianna Ghey's mother, but actually the entire transgender and LGBTQ plus community. And then third thing, there was an ITV, so leading up to the election, ITV have spent a few hours or days or whatever with the leader of both major parties, so Rishi Sunak and Keir Starmer, and they've made documentaries about them. The one about Rishi Sunak just happened to come out on Friday, so he's had something come out on Monday with Piers Morgan, something come out on Wednesday at PMQs, and now this thing on Friday. And I watched it last night, and again, very much a heavy focus on personality. And who is Rishi Sunak? Let's get to, where did he grow up? Oh, he was working in a pharmacy at age 50. He's all this stuff that in the grand scheme of things is very irrelevant. It's great that he used to play cricket. It's great. I love that he's a father and he brushes his kids' hair before they go to school and they eat breakfast together. But all of that really does nothing for me as a voter, and it's not relevant. And I think, like Scandal, I don't know if anyone watched Scandal, but where the fixers and the spin doctors come and they try to really polish certain people's images, and again, all about personality and all about, well, we like you, oh, we don't like you, and that feeding into the vote that people give. Keir Starmer's has got his coming up, I don't know when. And even funnily enough, Keir Starmer was also featured this morning in British Vogue. So we're really leaning quite American these days in terms of that low down, dirty, mudslinging politics, that real personality driven politics. Who are you? Who's your wife? Who's your child? Where did you grow up? What school did you go to? All stuff which in the grand scheme of things is not relevant to how you will lead the country. May have a little bit of relevance, but it's not what I'm going to go to the ballot on. And I think as much as I have to say about this country and as much as I have to say about Britain, I enjoy that we are not like America in the sense of the gimmicks and the shenanigans and the nonsense that we do when it comes to electing representatives. There's so much pandering. Like a white someone who's white and is running for the House of Senate can put on a kente, what's this thing called? A kente scarf, take the knee, and everybody is like, we are ready to sell our souls. And we don't really have that here in the UK. And I enjoy that. But it feels like we're slipping into that. I don't know if it's globalization. I don't know if it's social media. There's a real desire to be charismatic and to be that guy. You know what I mean? And Boris Johnson did a lot of it because he's a buffoon and he likes all that tomfoolery. But 20 years ago, Margaret Thatcher was not being featured in British Vogue. Cameras were not following her around like it's the Real Housewives of the House of Commons. Like, that wasn't happening. There was a real separation of, this is political life. These are our politicians and they are not celebrities. Similar to what I've been saying about influencers, they are not celebrities. Enjoy them for what they do. Hold them to a standard for what they do and for what they were elected to do, and leave it there. I don't give a rat's behind about your daughter. I'm just gonna be honest here. So I say all of that to say, we should just, again, I've just like my third time saying it, watch how these people move in an election year. Watch how they turn on the charm and they're charismatic and they try to do everything to pull the vote out of people, because it's happening even as we speak, and it's easy to be distracted by all of the charm and forget that once the charm disappears and once they're no longer gunning for your vote, it's down to business and you have to deliver. So I guess I'm saying that to just say, keep a watchful eye. Just watch how things move. Watch what comes out. Maybe articles, more documentaries, I don't know. But just keep alert, sober-minded, you know? I tried to make this episode shorter this week because we went on for a while last week, even though I really enjoyed last week's episode. But thanks for listening to the end. I want to know your thoughts, particularly on, I'm actually really interested on that Jay-Z issue. Like, I would love to do some internal assessing with you guys. Like, are we measuring success in a way that we shouldn't be? Really curious about that, because that convicted me a little bit. The Holy Spirit talking to me about that. I was like, oh, okay, damn. But yeah, thank you so much for listening to another episode. I want to hear from you. I might, like I said, work on that segment and get something sorted where we can actually hear you guys and what you guys are thinking and how you guys are receiving the content. But that marks the end of episode number 9. We're going into English double digits next week, baby. Double digits. I'm excited. Thank you for rocking with me. Thank you for all the love. And I'm going to go and watch Married to Medicine. So I will see you next week. Peace.